Okay, in these last couple, we are given the set builder notation, and we want to graph it and come up with the interval notation. So we're working with the set builder notation and coming up with the graph and the interval notation. So let's take a look at this first one. On this first one, notice we've got two numbers that we care about. We care about the -3 here. So that's on one end of my set builder notation. And I care about 4. So those are my two numbers I'll use is -3 and +4. Okay, let's see what this graph will look like. Let's look at one piece at a time. Let's deal with the right-hand side first because that's what we're used to looking at, which is the x is less than or equal to 4. Well, the x is less than or equal to 4 means I'm going to be pointing to the left. And the equal to means I want to include 4, which means I should have a bracket at 4. Okay, that's the easier of the two. Now let's look at the other one, which is the -3 is less than or equal to x. Now the reason why we don't like this one is because we're used to seeing the x come first. But when we just copy it, the number comes first, not the x. So the easiest way to do this one is to rewrite it as what? Well, we've got an x and a -3. Well, let's notice the inequality points where it points at. Notice it's pointed at the -3. So when you rewrite it, it should still be pointing at the -3. So when I rewrite it, it's going to still point at the -3. So now if I rewrite it like this, with the x coming first, it's a lot easier to graph because now it's clear that it's a greater than symbol and it also points to the right, so they'll meet in the middle. Again, it's an equal to, so this one should also have a bracket. So what does that mean the interval notation should look like? Well, if you trace it from left to right, notice it starts on the left at a -3 with a bracket, comma, it ends on the right-hand side at 4 with another bracket. And that's our interval notation for our answer, is right there. Let's try another one. Let's take a look at B. Again, we care about the same numbers, -3, and let's see, +4. So let's put those on our number line, -3 and +4. Let's graph it the same way. So the first thing we would look like is the x is less than 4, which would mean, again, less than means pointing to the left. But this time it's not equal to, so it's a parentheses, not a bracket. However, the other one, the -3, does, remember, when we rewrite it, it's still going to point at the -3. So it's still going to point at the -3. It's still pointing to the right, but it's still a bracket because of the equal to. So my interval notation should start out with a bracket -3 on the left, comma, it ends at 4, but this time it has a parentheses at the 4, and that's my interval notation this time. Bracket -3, comma 4 with a parentheses. Let's take a look at C. In C, we've got x is less than or equal to 4. This time we've only got one number we care about, so I'm only going to draw 4 on my number line. Notice it's got a less than or equal to, so it's pointing to the left because the x comes first. We can use that trick. And the equal to means we're going to have a bracket. So now how do I write out this interval notation? Well, notice this particular problem is starting out with an arrow pointing to the left, which means I'm going to start out with a negative infinity. Remember, infinities always use a parentheses, comma, it continues all the way until it hits 4. So, and remember at 4, it has a bracket, so I'm going to use a 4 to close that off. And that's it. That's my interval notation. Negative infinity, where I have a parentheses, comma, to 4, where I have a bracket. Let's take a look at D. D, again, we've only got one number. We've got x is greater than -3. So I'm going to throw -3 on my picture only. Notice, because x comes first, they can point the same direction. So it's pointing to the right. So my graph is going to point to the right. This time no equal to, though, so I'm going to use a parentheses, not a bracket. So that means my interval notation, when I start graphing it, will start with the -3 with a parentheses and continues off with an arrow, so to infinity. Remember, infinities always use parentheses, so that will also have a parentheses. So our interval notation is -3, where I have a parentheses, comma, to infinity, where I have another parentheses. Notice, I will say one small note here. Note, plus or minus infinity has parentheses in the interval notation. But not on the graph. We just see the arrows on the graph. But there's no parentheses on the graph for the infinities, for the positive or the negative infinities. You only see that in the interval notation. You still just see the arrows to indicate the infinities on your actual picture. So the question is, why are we going over all this?